Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the culture with our two legal experts, Royce Russell Esquire and Edward Pichardo Esquire, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. We thank you for tuning in today, joining our show. We know that you've been with us for two full seasons. We're now into our third season, and we are grateful for your time, participation, your comments, sharing it out as we do our best to bring you some of the breaking news, not so nice news, and interesting news that you can grow and learn from our legal experts. But before we get started, we're going to have our legal experts greet you and then go into remembering some of our ancestors who have recently transitioned. So over to you, Senor Pichado, and then Mr. Russell.
Hello, everyone. Hola, buena tarde. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on Speaking Legally. I believe you're going to find our show quite interesting, enlightening, as well as educational. So, looking forward to sharing the information with you all. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody, to another segment. One of the things and one of the topics that we're going to discuss today, we have discussed before. And I'm always a little hesitant in discussing subject matters that we've discussed before because it's a program about the here and the now. It's an educational program, and we want to stay, as we said, ahead of the curve and down the block, which we have done successfully for 3 seasons. However, what I've realized is that history does repeat itself. And when that happens, you got to speak to the things that you've seen before that are you currently seeing now. So that's part of what we're going to be discussing today. Situations, or at least one situation that we have seen before that is now come to roost again. And so we want to make sure that we stay steadfast in our efforts to educate those and also give our commentary where the culture and the legal meet in reference to this subject matter. So stay tuned and stay ready.
Absolutely. Well, we are sending prayers out for some additional families who have to publicly share in mourning the loss of their loved ones, as these individuals meant quite a bit to a number of people. To my sister, sorors of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, as a member of the D9, we all felt the shock of their newly inducted 27 national president transitioning. And it sent shockwaves through all of our organizations as we wrap them in love. There's no words that can really soothe the kind of pain when transition happens, especially when it's a shock. So we continue to lift up our prayers. And as I said to many members of the organization, I pray that her rich legacy and history and leadership provides moments of comfort as they remember her life and all that she did, not just within the sorority, but in her professional career.
Yeah, I will follow that up with saying, as we always do, rest in power, because we know that in reference to any movement, in reference to how you spend your collegiate years, having fraternity and sororities, in particular African American fraternities and sororities, is very pivotal. And to be the national president of Delta Sigma Theta is amazing. Any type of movement that we've ever thought about in life makes its way through fraternities and sororities, African American fraternities and sororities, whether it's voting registration, whether it's talking about reparations, sit-ins, you name it. And so condolences and rest in power.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I will say to Miss Hickman and her family, may she rest in peace, and condolences to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. And we also had another transition. Bill Owens, who was the first Black state senator in Massachusetts, transitioned at the age of 84 and had quite a career that, those in politics were able to follow and what he contributed. So we also want to say rest in power to him and our condolences to his family.
Yeah, and I think folks need to really look him up, and understand what he was about. He was one of the first senators to really start talking about reparations and bringing that to the forefront of the White House, Congress, the higher echelon of politics. And so, yeah, I would suggest that folks need to look him up. Rest in power, Brother Owens.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about doing this show that I really find welcoming and comforting is the research that we do in preparation also educates us as well, and brings to us information that we wouldn't have otherwise sought out. And you have the first Black state senator in Massachusetts, and he became the first Black state senator in the year, I believe, 1972, which you would think for a northeastern state that's supposed to be so liberal like Massachusetts, they didn't have their first Black state senator until 1972, what, 3 years after I was born. I mean, but the 70s were a time for breaking a lot of the major barriers for African Americans and people of color in the United States. So, Brother Bill Owens spoke to that. So may you rest in power, brother.
One of the things I will also say, and it's not so much adding levity to seeing this photo, but seeing this photo, seeing the richness, the black and white, seeing how we stood. I mean, like, let me just tell you something. That's a powerful photo, right? I mean, like, we in black and white. Look how folks look.
You might think you're looking at the Panthers.
Right. I mean, look how folks right now. Nobody's taking a day off in that photo. Nobody's taking a day off. It's like we about the business. I mean, like, it's really, you got the brother with the shades and the part halfway through his hairline. I mean, you got the sister in the back with the shades on. You got the brother in the back writing down. Like, folks are taking care of business.
Yeah, legendary.
That's a gathering of people that's like about it, as they say nowadays. About it. Definitely. So rest in power.
Rest in power. And then we also heard about trailblazer in the sports arena, Louisa Harris, former Hall of Famer. And she was officially drafted by an NBA team, and she dies at 66. That's so young.
Yeah, and she's one that I would welcome all of us to read about, especially young women of color. I mean, Lucia Harris, when you look at, she was playing the game when, I think even before, Title VII.
Yes.
She was playing the sport. She was, I guess, the youngest. I believe she was the youngest. Title IX. Okay, right. She was the youngest, I think, of about 8 brothers and sisters, and all of her brothers, I guess, played basketball, and so she pursued the sport as well, very successfully. Went to the Olympics, played in the Pan American Games, and then when she was recruited and offered a spot on the NBA team, she actually instead chose to, raise a family, and I believe when they interviewed her about it, she didn't at that time, she didn't think that it was necessarily possible for her to succeed in the all-male sport. And, to this day, it's 2022, and you
got 2 separate leagues.
Yeah, you got 2 separate leagues.
Right.
And so you wonder if ever the day is going to come where you have, sisters and, brothers actually playing on that same court before wide audience, especially with the level of talent that has been raised in the WNBA. Listen, man, I want to see a scrimmage. I want to see something, I want to see that Billie Jean King moment and see what
Well, yeah,
happens.
easy. I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
I think some egos might get bruised
I
in the
think
process.
I think
Oh
some egos
boy.
I
might
got
get
a feeling.
look, some egos might get bruised, but there might be some bruising. Period. You know what I mean?
Oh, hey.
Because you know, brothers ain't going to take it too
Oh,
Well, that's
lightly.
not the way
You know
the
what I mean?
sport is supposed to be
Nah,
played,
no.
though.
I'm just
oh
letting you
my
know.
goodness.
They're
Rest in
not going
power to
not going to take
Louisa
it too.
Harris.
But
I
what
mean,
I
we got
will
we got the female refs. We got that,
right, and look, she paved the way for Cheryl Miller and some others to be drafted. But one of the things that's unique, the Utah Jazz drafted her. Utah
At the
Jazz
time, the New
at the
Orleans
time.
Jazz.
Well, I mean, New Orleans. Would you have ever thought that, like, probably more metropolitan, probably New York Knicks or Chicago or Philadelphia, one of the bigger hubs, but New Orleans, right? New Orleans Jazz, they went and pressed the button and said, come on. And look, she wasn't too far wrong. There's two separate leagues. You still haven't accepted women. So she went and raised a family. But she was a force to reckon with. She was not a small woman, that's for sure. So, you know, you were getting all of your mail. You understand what I mean?
Well, we appreciate the path that she did pave and definitely celebrate her life. So it's just, this part of our show has continued to grow and we have to acknowledge those who transition and ancestors. It just reminds us how precious life is. Sometimes it's someone so young, sometimes it's someone who has had a rich life, but no matter how long your presence here on earth is, it's all valuable. And, we pray for the families because that's not easy to mourn your loved one along with the entire world. So, as per usual, though, on our show, some of our very dedicated viewers continue to stay ahead of the game. Like Kevin, how did you know that we were going to talk about what is happening with the Supreme Court and some
Well,
decisions?
before we go there,
Mhm.
though, Dr. Grant, I do want to acknowledge Regina King's loss of her son recently,
Yes.
Ian
Mhm.
Alexander. When I read that, I just kind of just had to hold myself because I can just imagine a parent, anytime a parent has to bury their child, because you don't, that's not something you contemplate in life. You think the reverse. My child is going to bury me. And, I found that so very, very tragic. So, my condolences to that family. And may that young man find the peace in heaven that he unfortunately wasn't able to find on earth.
Yes, I definitely concur.
And as you know, we're all parents here on the show. And like you said, you just can't even imagine this kind of pain. And the whole world, I think, took a breath, like a gasp when we heard what is happening. And I just really pray that the people around her are providing her with the kind of support that she needs to get through this because it's not easy. So yes, we
And she's
definitely
been
want.
having such a tremendous year, a tremendous last 2 years.
And that speaks to, you know, sometimes you hear people, at least I do, and you may hear the same. And Dr. Grant, you know, when you come from the backgrounds we come from and you achieve something and you're doing things in the community, you know, people kind of pride, you know, they're prideful of you and they joke with you and they'll say things, oh well, if I had your hand in cards, I'll throw my hand in. You know, if I had if I had your shoes, I would, you know, if I was you, you know, you enough sayings that give you the impression that they want to be in my shoes. They want to trade places. The grass is greener. And for those out there, I know we say it in fun and I know we mean it in a loving way, but there's a lot behind, as they say, door number one. You know, come on down. There's a lot behind door number one. You know, come on
Absolutely.
down. Things behind door number
Absolutely.
one. And you may not say that. And so, you know, as a parent, my heart goes out to her. But this is one of those teachable moments. Everybody thinks that somebody's life is so much better and things are all right, and they're not being uh, humane and really understanding what. There's always something behind door number one. Always.
And I just wanted to mention and look at this headline: social media not being healthy. Some of the things that everyone is trying to speculate and come up with different narratives. But this is a reminder and a PSA from the show. If you have children, stay in conversation with them about what's happening on the web, because there is so much happening and sometimes parents aren't aware. Our children are at a certain age where they hopefully are able to make certain choices and decisions, but you never know. You never know. And social media can be very wicked, to say the least, sometimes, or a place where people can't manage real conversations and relationships, and they value a like, and they value how many people are following them. And that's more important than anything else. So it's not from a place of judgment, it's a place of concern to always keep those lines of communication open, because you never know what someone is going through. And not just children, adults are having some of the similar challenges as well. So our hearts go out to
and
Regina King and her family.
and actually and actually take the time if to read what is being said, because what is being said can also be helpful and be a little insightful as to what someone might be going through, right? Read it. You know your kid, you know your loved one, read it, understand it, but put it in perspective with the other things that you know about that loved one. And then maybe there's a conversation that could be had or understanding there.
No, I when I was with the Brooklyn DA's office as the chief of youth diversion, we used to have a program there that targeted online bullying because we understood the dangers of the internet for young people. I mean, there's a lot of brutal activity taking place online, particularly because people are making cowardly statements that they would never make to a person's face. They feel more comfortable saying these things online from a distance to and what a manufactured audience, if you will, right? I mean, back in our day, somebody would snap on somebody else or hurl an insult on the playground, and at best, 4 or 5 people heard it. Online, you got hundreds, and you can just imagine the impact on that fragile ego that's just developing, that personality that's just starting to come together. It's hard, and so parents need to make sure, like you said, that they're in constant communication with their kids. And I try to. I'm the father of 2 teenagers, and I'm glad that for now, my children feel free enough to kind of discuss when when something has happened, somebody has said something, and online, and then we kind of talk about it, because you just don't want them to be suffering in silence. They're not understanding how to brush things off and say, forget that or this, just keeping it from having an outsized impact on them.
Absolutely. So we will continue to send up prayers. And, this is where the legal meets the cultural. And culturally, we have to just be our brother and sisters keeper, especially in situations like this. And as we now move into the news, talking about what we see happening with our Supreme Court Justice Breyer to retire. That rhymed. But this is causing quite a stir.
Right on timer. You know what I
Uh,
mean? I mean, I say right on time with a levity because, um, we talk about what happened with the past president and the appointments that were made, and there's been conversation about expanding the court, or at least in theory, expanding the court to kind of get the balance back in reference to conservatives versus liberal or even moderate. And this is an opportunity to for the new administration, Biden, and to put someone in place in power, younger, with an ideology that's in line with the ideology of those that are in power now, to create more of a balance.
now for me, I mean, I had, this was a topic of discussion for the last number of months, particularly because of the justice's age. As many will recall, the notorious RBG, right, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, unfortunately passed away during the last presidential administration, leading to the disastrous result of having a conservative take the place of one of the most progressive justices in history. And so one of the fears here actually was that Justice Breyer would try to hold on. There would be, because right now the concern is the midterm elections. Some, watchers are afraid that the Democrats might lose might lose the Senate or the House of Representatives or both. And the danger is more prominent in the Senate, where the numbers are so much tighter, and they're the ones who do appointments. And if you recall, it was in the Senate that the confirmation of Merrick Garland, who is now the attorney, or the attorney general, right, was prevented from being confirmed as Obama's pick for the Supreme Court. So the question is whether lately you've been having Biden's initiatives, especially with the voting rights bill, being stymied by
whether
Kirsten
the Democrats
Sinema,
going to be able to stand up.
Arizona and Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Are they going to interfere in that process? What's going to happen here? So this may be somewhat welcome news, but we're not out the woods yet. Let's see what happens if we can get a liberal justice confirmed to deal with this clear imbalance.
If I understand you correctly, we're not out the woods for two reasons. One, we might lose the Senate, and two, once again, the Democrats might step on their own tail and their own foot and prevent something that should be so easy, something that the playbook that the Republicans have down pat. We're moving to door number one. Everybody move to door number one, and everybody moves to door number one. And a matter of fact, they're so efficient at moving to door number one, they may even grab a couple of Democrats to help them move to door number one. But on the reverse, when the Republicans say we're moving to door number one, the Democrats moving to door number one, you got some Democrats is like, all right, y'all go ahead, I'll meet you there.
Well. What I've said to folks with that mindset quite often is that it has to be remembered that the Democratic Party is much more diverse than the Republican Party, and I think that's particularly a reason why you don't have them moving in that same lockstep fashion.
And I completely understand that, but the problem is that when they don't move in a fashion, it's called compromise. I'm not getting all I want, but if I don't move in this fashion, what I'm going to get on the other side is even worse. And this holier than thou, no, I'm gonna make sure nobody moves, and then nothing gets done. And then the next 4 years or 8 years, when somebody else is in power, then that person that didn't move, that had that alternative motive, is stuck because nothing has happened. You ain't get it. No, look, as my father used to say, something beats a blank, right? Something beats a blank. And that's, look, it may sound like St. Mary's 101, but it's profound. Something beats a blank. You don't have any money. I got some money. I split what I have with you. You're not complaining. You're going to take what's there.
Well, let's see if some level of compromise, negotiation, bargaining takes place that will ensure this appointment. But let's see what happens. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, also a part of the headline was the fact that Biden apparently pledged to nominate a Black woman. So that will be interesting as well as we follow this new story.
And some of that, I understand the intent, but the impact is really, really hard hitting. I understand his intentions, but the impact is hard hitting because now that you stated what you want, there will be people across the board to make sure that that doesn't happen. Do your homework. Just do your homework. Mm-hmm. I never see, the people that don't want to fight and the people that say, I'm going to punch you in your face. Well, you don't want to fight because you're telling me what's going on. The people that do want to fight, you just get hit in the face. So sometimes it's better just to preserve the message and just do your homework.
Well, the bottom line is I'm sure there can't be, there's no shortage of Black female jurists throughout this country that are qualified for that Supreme Court seat. So You know,
I would like to believe that, Ed. I really would. Not to say that folks within our own culture is not educated, but how many times you go to court and you see the same black folks? The numbers, no matter how many people you see graduate law school, and you know that the numbers are coming, but you don't see it in the places. You just don't see the faces. Somebody can call you right now and say, I have an immigration problem. I want a black attorney. You can't even name 5. And you live in New York City. Wow. And I'm not putting you to the test. I'm just saying that's reality. So, yes, you may have to dig. You may even have to dig deep. But there's something to dig
I guess what you're saying is you shouldn't be putting yourself in that type of box from the get.
You should not.
Gotcha.
Just do your work.
Yeah.
Right. And not everything to speak so early. Well, that's a whole nother conversation. Another conversation.
Doesn't have to be said.
Well, maybe he should call you for counsel. You can take that on as part of your next.
But listen, hey, look, but maybe we should start locally as we go to our next story.
Okay. Well, before we get to our next story, Kevin put a little joke in the chat, said that the phone call that you were receiving in the office was Tasha K, who needs a new mouthpiece after the Cardi B defamation case. I don't know if our legal experts are familiar with that. But yeah, she won a case of, I think, 1.25 million over a liable. So maybe that's something we could talk about. You have to watch yourself out here and what you do and what you say, because I'm sure this case will create some sort of precedent. So I appreciate that Kevin is always keeping us abreast of what's happening for our legal experts to weigh in on, but we'll give them a chance to kind of review and see if there's something that they would like to comment on. But just in a quick glance from our dedicated viewer, this is what he's talking about. That story broke 1.25. I don't even know what Tasha K did, but clearly it was something that was worth $1.25 million. So to be investigated. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing that to our attention. Interesting in pop culture. This is where the legal meets the cultural. So we'll allow our legal experts to dive into the facts of that case and see if there's anything to pull out for those who might be watching. And you might have a blog, because this is a blogger who got in trouble. So be careful how we use our words. And
you know the Bronx is always going to stand up. You know that, right? So,
well,
to the blogger, when you say something about people from the Bronx, you know they standing up. So be careful. Be careful. Be careful. You laughing so hard, Dr. Grant, because you from the Bronx. So be careful.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, yeah. Don't play with the Bronx. But there are some other issues that are happening across our city with gun violence. And I know we wanted to touch on it. As Mr. Russell said, we've talked about this before. There's a very specific blueprint to end gun violence that has come out by our New York City Mayor Adams that we will touch on. But I know that our legal experts wanted to make some commentary. This is really just unfortunate what we see happening. And I wanted to wait until this part of the show that we could pay our respects to now both officers who passed away in that shooting in Harlem. So we're definitely going to pause to remember them. And I'm going to show their photos in a moment. But, you know, it was such a sad and a hard story with two officers that, you know, try to uphold and do things. You know, we talk about when things go wrong from all sides. And this was an opportunity for us to really just pause and say, we can't continue this, right? Because that is not right. What happened to these two officers. And unfortunately, the second officer succumbed to the challenges around the shooting. So I want you all to just weigh in on that as I'm getting ready to share in remembrance about our two fallen soldiers that tried to do the right thing and excited that they were men of color, eager to serve and protect, and now at a young age have lost their lives.
Yeah, I mean, as a resident of the Harlem community, I've seen the impact, and folks are just in shock. There's a very heavy police presence on 135th and Lenox where this occurred, which is right near the Schomburg Library. For those that aren't aware, don't know, and precinct is actually a block away from there on 135th between 7th and 8th. And for something like this to happen is like, it goes to show you how dangerous responding to any domestic violence situation can be, not just for the civilians or the folks at the home calling the officers, but the officers themselves. And when they show that clip that this young man had attached to this Glock gun, what, it had 40 rounds?
Yes.
It's like, it causes your heart to skip a beat that there are individuals in the community out there who have that type of weaponry at their, readily available for their use. I mean, it's like, it's absolutely shocking. and apparently each one of these officers had, from what's been documented, had very good intentions for the community in terms of their service. They wanted to,
Right.
They took up the profession to actually serve. So it's hard to digest. Absolutely.
One of the things that we always talk about in reference to policing is having people from the community, right? I talk about it from a perspective of infiltration. And the reason why I use the word infiltration is that a lot of times within our community, the police and the community are at odds. And you can't change that just from the outside. You got to change that from the inside and outside. So you need to become a police officer. You need to infiltrate in a positive way that agency, that organization, so you can do right and you can change the relationship. And these two brothers, because they are our brothers, were doing so. They were from the community. They encourage others from the community to become police officers, right? So they can positively affect what goes on in the community that they have seen growing up, day in and day out. Now, that precinct, the 32nd precinct, has his own issues and had his own issues throughout history as to how they do their business.
Mm-hmm.
But these officers, because I wouldn't be transparent if I didn't mention that, so I have to mention that.
Mm-hmm.
But these officers were true about taking care of the community and doing what they had to do. I didn't know them personally, just like I didn't know Brother William Owens, Bill Owens. I only know what I read and what people tell me. And I have to take it from the people that are giving me the information. And when that tragedy occurred, there was no script to the individuals that were interviewed that would tell you wonderful things about Jason Rivera and Mora and how, they were encourage people to go to the Explorer program and how they grew up in the community. And they would tell other people, you need to become a police officer so you can change the dynamics within the community, African-American dynamics, Latino dynamics, one of the same dynamics. So come and join me, led by example. So, today we're talking about the elephant in the room as we pay respects to these two brothers that lost their lives as members of the services. But we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is gun violence. And I can tell you right now, I've debated, like, sometimes, once again, everything that you think you don't have to say. But I'll say this, as a civil rights attorney fighting against false arrest and police brutality, hey, if your rights may have been violated and you have a gun and you walking through my community, don't stop at my office. Keep on going. Keep on going. Because fighting because your rights were violated when you were doing harm in the community, because there's really no reason for you to have a gun in the community, is not what I'm about.
Understood. I mean, that's always been like a really real issue in the community. Like, what was your intent? Was your intent, to protect, or was your intent to go out there and hurt someone else in the community? I mean, back in the days, the Black Panthers used to patrol the community in Oakland armed. At that time, their intention was to protect the community against the abuse and the violence that was being inflicted upon the community by the police. But, in many of these situations,
that's different than the guy in the bodega who got it and he got it on his side. There's
nothing revolutionary going on with, Pookie going into the store with the gun or running around the community threatening others and killing our sons and daughters. You know what I'm saying? Our fathers and our uncles and our mothers. There's nothing revolutionary going on there. So anybody now that tries to like come up, try to speak to that dynamic, if you're not talking about that you was doing it because you were protecting the community, then I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? You need to just
keep it moving,
keep it stepping with that.
You
know what I mean?
Keep it moving.
You just keep it stepping. I mean, people understand if you're in your home, maybe you're in your home, and then even then, you know what I mean. If you're not doing it right, you're exposing your own children and your family, possibly. Not to mention that the statistics speak to the amount of guns that a number of guns that are in the streets are guns that have been stolen during burglaries of homes that end up on the streets. There's no question. I know this. I understand this to be a fact that some homes are actually targeted when criminals know that individual may be in possession of a firearm that they can go in there and take. So, just want to, speak to that,
And I want to make sure that I'm clear, right? We are attorneys. We do criminal defense work. You have a right to defense. Absolutely. And we will represent you from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking more from a perspective of civil rights, when you're falsely arrested. If you're falsely arrested and you have a gun on you, you're gonna have to explain something to me. How are we suing the city to get you economic compensation when what it appears to be, and like I said, you're gonna have to explain something to me. You're in the wrong in having this gun in our community. But we could talk about that another day. I want to make sure we stay focused, as you said, a moment of silence and deference. And condolences to the family.
Absolutely. We wanted to definitely recognize, and what we shared, this is where the legal meets the cultural. We talk all the time, as you said, about representation, and that's what makes this such a hard story, because those in the community who knew them, who appreciated what they were working towards doing, this wasn't a fate that anyone felt that they deserved. And I don't think that anyone should die a death so violent. With gun violence, it's a problem, and that's what we're about to talk about now, so much so that the mayor came out with a particular blueprint around it. But we've been having this conversation for a long time. What is it going to take for the kind of legislation to be in place to protect our communities?
Well, I can tell you, before we get into the blueprint, one of the things we need to establish, and everybody needs to hear this far and wide, that the penalties are severe. The lowest level gun penalty is criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree. The way it works in New York, the higher the degree, the less penalty. In New Jersey, they work it differently. The lower the degree, the higher the degree, the higher the penalty. So, here it is. In New York, you charged with criminal possession of 4th degree. That's a misdemeanor. That means you have possession of the gun. It doesn't state whether it's loaded or not. There's some circumstances around it. You're facing, a year or less in jail. But as you move on, you have criminal possession of a weapon in school grounds, which we know is happening, which we read stories about it day in and day out. We know that it happens in New York, it happens in other states, but in New York, that's an E felony. So now you have a felony if you get convicted of that. And you're facing a year and a half in jail if it's your first offense, a year and a half if it's your second offense, but your first offense has nothing to do with violence. But if you're convicted of this and you have a prior conviction, and that prior conviction has to deal with violence, an assault, right? Something of that nature, then the minimum is 2 years. The maximum is 4 years. And so that's an E felony. And I'm going through this, and I'll go through it before we get to our story, because you need to understand the penalties that come with it.
And whether it's worth it.
And whether or not it's worth it. So once again, having a gun on school grounds is an E felony. If it's your first offense, you're doing a year and a half. If it's your second offense and your first offense was a non-violent, you're doing a year and a half. If it's your second offense and the first offense was a violent, you're doing 2 years. That's the minimum. The maximum is 4 years. But then we move on. Criminal possession of a weapon in the 3rd degree. And now that is a felony once again, and
it's a D.
It's a D felony. right? And so now you move up the scale, right? And so now you're no longer looking at just a minimum of 1.5 years. Now you're looking at 2 years if it's your first offense. You're looking at 3 years if it's your second offense, but your first offense was a non-violent. You're looking at 5 years if your first offense was a violent, and now you got this other charge on you, criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree. And the maximum is 7. So these are not small numbers. These are determinate numbers. No ifs, ands, buts about it. This is what's going to happen to you. That's it at the end of the day. Now, no one has even spoke about the gun being loaded. Most of the times people have guns, they are loaded, right? So now, if you have a loaded gun, which is criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, now this is New York statutes, and I'll go through New Jersey fairly quickly so we can move on with the blueprint, is what we call a B felony, a B felony. And so now you're looking at, excuse me, that's a C felony. And once again, now and I'm looking through my cheat sheet and I want to make sure I get the numbers right. So now you're looking at on the C felony is, hold on one second. The C felony, now you're looking at 3.5. So now the numbers go up. So as you can see, the scale go up. Now you go to B felony. Now you're looking at first offense 5 years, second offense 8 years. If the prior is not a violent, if your prior was a violent, now you're looking at 10 years. So the bottom half is 5, the maximum is 15. That's for one gun. If you have 2 or more, the numbers go up. If you got 3 or more, the numbers go up. So at the end of the day, we're talking about some serious time here. We're not talking about little time here. You know, on the C felony, like I said, you're doing 3.5. If you have a prior, you're doing 5. And if you have a violent prior, you're doing 7. And the maximum is 15 years. So those are not minimum amount of time. That's serious time there. And that goes from possession on school grounds. That goes possession if you use it in a robbery or you use it in kidnapping, you use it in assault. Not only will you get the time that is afforded by a B felony because you had the gun and you committed a felony, you're going to get 5 years tacked onto that to run consecutive. And what do we mean by consecutive? That means after you finish your 3, your 5, your 8 years, you got to do 5 more years on top of that. So there is no in-betweens.
And just so folks understand, there when it comes to these gun charges, you're also dealing with a dynamic where most of these cases are routed through what's referred to, quote unquote, as a gun court. Okay, a judge that only or primarily deals with gun cases, an assistant district attorney whose caseload is these gun cases. The NYPD has a gun suppression unit that's what they do. That's what they investigate. So I say that I say that to say that when you are charged with a gun, it is something that is treated as something, significant by the system itself, despite the fact that you have this, proliferation of gun violence throughout the city for the unfortunate individuals that do get, caught with these for whatever reason. There are some very serious consequences, not to mention that felony sitting on your record, the effect that has all over, in terms of your job prospects and other opportunities that are lost because of it. So, just want to put that out there.
And I also want to add, a lot of times people focus on the manufacturers and they're like, well, what are the manufacturers' liability? We can have a discussion, but not today. So if you on the street or you in the street and you think that you're going to do one of these makeshift guns that you saw on YouTube or something like that, or you're going to take the gun that you got and you're like, I'm not using it, I'm going to sell it to somebody. Well, let's go through some of those penalties. That's a D felony. You know what I mean? Where you can do 2 years. And if it's your second offense, You could do 3 years. If it's your third offense and your second offense was a violent, you do 5 years. So, and if you sold more than one gun, then your time goes up. So the way the statute reads is that if you sell 5 or more guns, it's a D felony. 10 or more guns, it becomes a B or a C felony. Now you may say, hey, look, who's going around selling 10 guns at one time? I don't know. But the way the statute reads is that you could sell those 10 guns or those 5 guns in a year and you still get charged with it. So it doesn't have to be a one-time transaction. That's what I'm saying. For those who are trying to be smart and be slick with it. That's the cultural side. You trying to be slick with it.
Important
No,
to say.
you sell today on Tuesday, and you come back 8 months from now. As long as it's still in the year 2022 and the number equals 5, you're going to get that D felony. You're going to get that B felony. That's what's going to happen. So let's not do that. Let's stay away from that. And before we get to the article, in New Jersey, it's even worse. In New Jersey, the way they do it is, once again, they do it second-degree crimes, third-degree crimes, and fourth-degree crimes. And the second-degree crime for having a gun is 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10, that's what you're getting. They don't care about what your past looks like. They don't care what your future look like. It's 5 to 10 years, all right? And if you have a gun and you have drugs on you, it's 5 to 10 years. Second-degree crime, all right? Now, it's interesting because New Jersey believes in, deer hunting, and it's a little different than New York. They treat, if you have a rifle or a shotgun, differently, right? That's 3 to 5 years. We could talk about the political intent in that, but that's a third-degree crime. That's 3 to 5 years, all right? And if you have like a BB gun, you're getting 3 to 5 years.
With a BB gun?
A BB gun.
Wow.
They treat it the same way they treat it as a shotgun or a rifle. So if you make your way over to George Washington, Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, you better be aware. You better be aware. And this is important because, once again, I said we talked about history and repeating itself. When folks are talking about defund the police and what that meant and how people were distorting the tagline, it's about reallocation of money, not necessarily defunding. And we went through having our multiple segments of, we want our community safe as well, right? Nobody I know who's black or brown or any culture wants an unsafe community. Well, part of having a safe community is making sure guns are off the street. Right. And as much as I see it as an advocate, as much as Ed should see it as an advocate, and I talk about cardiac arrest, a tactical guide on how to handle unlawful police stops, police have a job to do. And we want our community safe. And for the record, I've never really had a problem with the idea of how to keep our community safe. Is the implementation that was the issue. Whether it was undercover police officers, street crime unit, whatever you want to call it, it's the implementation of it, where folks are getting treated unfairly, where you're making, erroneous stops and nothing's coming out of it. But we need something like that, and that means getting the guns off the street. I'm gonna jump off the soapbox. You can jump on.
I've always been of the belief that you can keep the community safe without violating people's rights or disrespecting people in the community. I am loath to tolerate situations where officers are randomly stopping people in the community without a sufficient level of intelligence or reasonable suspicion that they are actually in possession of a weapon. I think the idea of, protecting the community and finding it necessarily to violate some rights is rather abhorrent to me. And if you happen as an officer to make a mistake, you should be willing at that same time to apologize and say, listen, I am so sorry. I thought that this is what was going on. Apparently that's not what's going on. Please accept my apology. Here's my badge number. Here's my name. Here's the precinct where I come from. I don't, that's all I have. We're just trying to keep the community safe. And I believe if you have that dialogue with a well-intentioned member of the community, you will get a response that is reciprocal, in that individual in the community is going to appreciate what it is that you're trying to do. Because folks in the community have children, they have mothers, they have daughters, they have, they have aunts and uncles, grandfathers and grandmothers. So they want to see the community safe too. They don't want to see situations like what occurred, I believe, yesterday in a hospital in the Bronx, where some young man got upset that somebody was eyeing him and decided to start busting shots inside an emergency room or an entrance area to the hospital. I mean, you just don't do that. That's unheard of. I believe they arrested the young man either late yesterday or early today,
because he wrote his name in the book saying that he needed treatment for asthma.
And the reason for him shooting at this individual was he didn't like the way he was looking at him. What are you doing inside of a hospital in the first place? Now, so
that's a whole nother show.
But listen, as someone who lives in the community, I refuse to believe that we don't know who these individuals are who are in the community doing this.
And that's where the rubber meets the road.
And that's the way the problem is.
Right, because you and I coming from work, what are you doing?
And if
come on, who I am.
Yeah, and if you're a community police officer really policing that community, you know who they are. You know about the few individuals who are causing the violence and where to go.
Right.
So the question becomes is, why aren't they pursuing these individuals with the sufficient amount of rigor and putting in the resources?
Me.
Yeah, now you can't because I call that type of random stopping lazy policing. Right. Like, you're not sitting there and really doing surveillance. You're not really monitoring. You're not really looking to see, wait a minute, that dude, right? You know what I'm saying? That we see, you know what I mean? Not me, who's coming home from work trying to feed my family. You go all of a sudden, just because you decide that, you know what, that car's a little too fancy for you. I just don't like the way you looked when you were driving by my car. So I'm just all of a sudden gonna manufacture a reason to stop you and ask you if I could go into your car and disrespect you. I'm not down with that.
See, all of that will subside to a degree with the community policing if it's in effect, right?
If it's in effect,
I don't know.
And if I see you and I haven't seen you in a long while, and I'm from the community, I might say, well, damn, he probably went to college. That's why I didn't see him, and now he's back. Rather than he went to Rikers, right? If you see me at Christmas and you see me at Easter and you see me at those things, and you see me give a handshake to somebody in front of the building, you might have a different perspective. And I know.
Well, let's push a pin in that.
Forward. Right. This is what we're going to go.
We're at the 50 minutes.
Let's push a pin in it, because we're going into a very needed discussion and reminder, and we didn't really get to unpack this new piece of report that came out, the blueprint to end gun violence. And I just want to touch on this as we'll probably continue this conversation, because there's some more that we need to be aware of. And this is a problem across the country. The level of gun violence, it's out of control. And carjacking, robberies. But these are symptoms of a greater problem when you talk about the challenges with certain people having access to a steady paycheck and all that the pandemic created as layers of complication on already complicated system. But the mayor is talking about enhancing the public safety units with new neighborhood safety teams. So, it's going to take quite a bit, but I think what you both just shared is the grassroots approach, taking back our communities.
Well, what I would say is I'm welcoming the audience, the community, to really pull this up. It's accessible, by the way. You can find it online. It's about 15 pages. Now, a lot of what you're going to find here is kind of, I would just have to say, some of it is more of the
You don't
same.
have to say it, I'll say it. Okay. It's more the same and high level talk.
Yeah. But there's a few gems in here if it's hopefully carried out, the right way. Unfortunately, some of these efforts, I think, are going to get stymied by some of the forces at work. Like, for instance, he wants to do more detection efforts at the iron pipeline, meaning the bridges and tunnels that come into New York City from out of state, because of course the understanding is a lot of these guns are being manufactured or sold out of state and are being brought into the state. The question is whether the titans of commerce are going to allow the traffic to get slowed down and the commerce to stop. Let's not kid ourselves. Every time you go through one of these tunnels and over these bridges, the traffic is overwhelming. Where are you going to do these stops? Are you going to be randomly stopping folks? Are you going to go back to the days of the New Jersey State Troopers messing with people on the way into New York and coming out? I don't know.
Let me add some.
And who are they stopping?
Wait, and let me add a little complexity to that, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make sure everybody understands. There are points in here that we do support.
Yeah.
And we're just saying, and we're going to point out things that are difficult. Not that we don't support them, they're just difficult. And one of the things that you're pointing out is a point that is difficult. And the reason why it's difficult, guess what? We don't have any more easy pass things. You ride right through. Everything is up above. There's no stopping, getting a quarter, getting a nickel.
Not anymore.
Where you could move someone over. Remember, it's straight.
You don't even got that guy in the booth who's taking a good look at what's going on inside that car.
It is a straight. Now, look, that might be low brow for most people. Like, well, why Royce is talking about he just drives straight through? Because that's the practicality of it. If I'm driving straight through and I got the man above scanning my easy pass where I don't even have to stop, well, what are you going to do? You're going to follow me? Implementation.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the talk and what's written and the implementation may not always be.
And is the stopping going to be random or is it going to be pretext?
There's so much more.
Color. You know, that's the thing. There's also talking about increasing resources for the gun violence suppression units.
Yeah, I think what
so hold on.
What she's trying to say is that she wants to put a pin in it.
Okay.
Well, what I want to say in addition to that is I put the link in for all of our viewers so that you can easily assess the document for yourself and review it so that you can be aware of what it is, all valid points that our legal experts are making, but you can now just click on the link. If you're watching the replay, you can click on the link, pull up the document, read through it. There are a lot of great ideas. We will have to watch and see for the implementation. I believe the deputy mayor in charge of public safety, Banks, is going to work through this with the police commissioner and all the other parties involved. That's Philip Banks. So we will continue this conversation. This is not the end of it. This won't be solved overnight.
This is the only program where you're gonna get homework.
Yeah,
you got some homework right now. If you following us and you wanna have this discussion, so unless you have read the plan and unless you've seen this segment, do not pop up with a question on the next segment that reveals that you haven't saw this segment and read the plan.
And I just want to say, I commend Mayor Eric Adams for attempting to come up with a blueprint for comprehensively ending gun violence in the city of New York. I look at this as a starting manifesto that needs to be developed and worked on with members of the community for years to come. I'm reading this, I'm looking at this, and I want to hopefully be in a position or have the ability, or even without any of that, I do plan on making clear some of my recommendations as to how some of these points can work better. Okay. Absolutely. And I think this show is part of that as well, because the idea, there's a lot of stuff in here that's good. That's good in terms of thought. Now, like Roy said, the implementation, sharpening it up, making it better. There's talking about some youth employment programs. There's talking about mental health resources and all that.
Yes.
Maybe you don't agree exactly with what's in there as it's stated, but that's not a reason to, say, oh, this is not something
you
that
don't
we can work on.
You don't throw it away.
You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You work with what you got.
I think that's
who cares and says, listen, I care about what's going on.
Oh, you see what she's trying to do.
It's showtime. You getting into it. We gave them the homework and you giving them more homework. Like,
you know what I'm saying?
what we doing?
You know what I'm saying? What we
No, but
do is
I
yesterday.
appreciate
What we do?
I appreciate your passion around it, and I think that's an example of how to get engaged and stay engaged because it's gonna take all of us at the table offering our feedback, participating in order to make it happen. So, yeah, we're at the top of the hour, so we are going to close out the show, but we thank you for being here, participating in the discussion. Great to see everyone, Kevin, Rich. Thank you for passing by, adding your comments. We'll be back. We'll probably have a follow-up to this conversation and find out ways how you can get involved just by reading the blueprint. So we'll be back, same time, same place next week, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stay well and be safe, everyone. Any final words, gentlemen?
Just want to say to everyone, just please stay safe in the midst of everything that's going on, and God bless you and your family.
Do your homework, read the blueprint so we can have discussion next week because we're going to get in it and we're going to get all around it.
Yeah, we're going to put our fingers in.
Mash it up, as they say. Mash it up. Mash it up.
Oh,
Mash it up.
Lord. Bye-bye, everyone. We'll see you.